What's going on, college football fans? Welcome back to the First and Long College Football Show. You're here for the overreaction show to what we just saw in Week 5. Wow, what a finish to another crazy weekend of college football. Georgia, Alabama, you really just had everything that encompasses college football. What a wild finish to a roller coaster of a football game. We've got other games to talk about, but none bigger than the one that we just finished watching. Mason, welcome back to the First and Long show. You were out gallivanting in the ocean last week. Welcome back. You came back just in time for the best football game of the year.
Yeah, I guess you could say that. As a Georgia fan, right now at least, it doesn't feel like the most, the biggest game of the year, the best game of the year. But for college football, it certainly was. This was quite the game. Georgia comes back from being down 28 points. Really should have won the game in the fourth quarter there, but a couple of plays don't go their way, and they aren't able to come up with the win. But overall, as a Georgia fan, I think the takeaway is, you feel really good about what Georgia did in the second half to come back being down 28 points, put themselves in a position to win the football game. Um, I come away from this game feeling better about Georgia than I did going into the football game. And that's kind of weird to say given that they didn't win, but at the end of the day, they hit some explosives in the second half, and really, I thought should have won the game by the end of it, and should have come back from 28 points, but allowed a few more explosive plays from Alabama than they were able to provide, and Alabama ends up with another win against Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this was just an absolute instant classic. Welcome to the First and Long College Football Show. Thank y'all for watching. If you don't mind, hit the like button, hit that subscribe button if you hadn't done it. I hope you'll consider doing that and coming and hanging out with us here on the First and Long College Football Show. Mason, yeah, I agree with you. Alabama was able to hit. They were much more efficient on offense. I think would be the word. Georgia with three turnovers in the football game. I mean, there was multiple things that you could point to in this football game for Georgia and say, if Georgia corrects that right there, then maybe this outcome's a little bit different. But I mean, the moral of the story is Georgia had no answer to start this football game for what Alabama brought to the table. And credit Georgia, they were able to make adjustments. Like this Georgia team, we've grown to learn over the years now that Kirby Smart has been at Georgia, that they're going to go in the locker room and they're going to come out with some kind of plan typically, and
Yeah.
it's going to work to some effect. Now, do they come back and win the football game every single time? No, tonight that was not the case, but they had every opportunity to do so. And Ryan Williams, credit him, against Humphreys there. I that was just an amazing catch there, and a nice, even more amazing run after the catch. But the way he came back to that football, I knew right then that Alabama was probably going to win this football game. But I mean, yeah, you got to credit Georgia for coming out in the second half and not giving up. And offensively, Georgia dominated in the second half of this football game. Um, but we've seen Georgia do this multiple times this year where the offense goes MIA for certain periods of time. And I can't help but think the more I watch this team that it has a lot to do with the fact that Georgia doesn't have a great run game right now. That I feel like that is the biggest missing piece to the equation for Georgia. I feel like Georgia is playing like it. They're calling the plays like that. So I feel like it accentuates it even more. But I feel like Georgia has a weakness as far as running the football, and I think it can kind of get you where you're going into three and outs, and that's really what Georgia did at the beginning of this football game. They were sputtering, but once they caught their footing there in the second half, they just lit it on fire reminds me of the Clemson game we saw early this season. Clemson didn't have the offensive firepower to be able to exploit the first half in the game where Georgia's offense was sputtering themselves. And Georgia's defense, I think, had probably a little bit better game plan for Clemson in the first half. Georgia just, absolutely could not figure it out in the first half. I've never seen a defense just at the drop of a hat figure it out all of a sudden in the second half. That was really, really unbelievable. And I didn't feel like the play calling was all that different for Alabama in the second half. I just thought that Georgia got punched in the mouth, really got knocked to the mat there in the first half, 30-7, I think it was at halftime or just after halftime. And they're able to come back. It's really unbelievable. Instant classic. What do you got on this game? 547 total yards for Alabama, 519 for Georgia. Carson Beck has to throw the ball 50 times for Georgia to get to 439 passing yards. But with all that being said, 3 of 15 for Georgia on third down, 3 of 11 for Alabama on third down. The biggest difference here was Alabama's ability to run the football.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think we would have seen more of a Georgia rushing attack had they not gotten down by so much, so soon, so early in this football game. Down 28 points. This Georgia offense is not really built to come back from a 28-point deficit, especially not in the run game. That was not going to be how Georgia came back to win this game. I really credit Georgia for sticking with Carson Beck throughout this entire football game, continuing to put the ball in his hand to allow him to make plays and really put Georgia in a position to win the football game by the end of this game. And I don't know what else to say. Georgia had a chance to win this football game after being down by so many points early in the football game, and really just lost it at the end. I think Alabama just made a few more plays than Georgia. We knew that this was going to be a close game. It was pretty much a pick 'em in my eyes, and Alabama came out on top. The home team came out on top. But if Georgia continues to play like they did in the second half of this football game, they can beat anybody, right? And I think that was really the takeaway from this game was that Georgia is not a bad team. They played pretty bad in the first half, but by the second half, they really found their rhythm and came back to make this a football game, which nobody expected when they're down 28 points. I can't say enough about the relentlessness from this Georgia football team and what they were able to do to make it a football game. And like you said, an instant classic. This had playoff implications, obviously. You can make light of the game if you want and say it didn't really matter, but it didn't seem like that when you were watching the game play out in live time. And Georgia certainly answered the bell in the second half and just came up a little bit short.
Yeah, absolutely. It just baffles me, like I said, how the Georgia offense can kind of go missing for periods of time throughout the game. And like I said, I think that has a lot to do with Georgia's inability or right now they're kind of banged up at running back, I guess you could say. Don't have everybody available. Georgia obviously looked better when Cash Jones came in the game later in the game today. He provided a spark, a big catch in this football game. So maybe he's, more the answer going forward. Him and ETN. ETN, I thought he had some really important carries in this football game. So I don't want to belittle what he did in this football game, because if we don't have ETN in this game, then Georgia's doesn't come back at right and isn't in this football game. Excuse me. Georgia 5 of 5 on fourth down in this game.
Yeah.
That was a big, big stat right there, and a big reason why Georgia was able to come back. Very interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff. Let's kind of get into some of these other games. I feel like I could keep talking about that one, and we're going to be talking about that one for a long time. I mean, that is a instant classic. And as far as what you were talking about, Mason, as far as the playoff implications go, both teams still have a really, really good chance to make the playoffs. Georgia's chance of being able to have a bye in the first round of the playoff just went down a pretty good bit, right? But there is still a really good possibility, because I'm going to tell you something. Watching this Alabama team and having watched Tennessee a good bit already this year, Tennessee is going to be a really tough matchup for Alabama this season.
Yes.
They're going to match up really, really well against Alabama, and that is going to be one hell of a collision. Wouldn't be surprised if Tennessee came out on top in that football game, and then who's to say Georgia doesn't beat Tennessee, and we've got some kind of three-way tie thing going on. So the possibilities are still endless on how this can end for Georgia, Alabama. The end of this chapter of this year for the SEC is very far from written, and that leads us to one of the other games that we got to talk about here for just a minute, and the one that everybody has been talking about today before this monumental Georgia Alabama game came on. Kentucky at Ole Miss. The Kentucky Wildcats go on the road to the SIP and get the win 20-17. How about those Wildcats, Mason? And I am going to go, I got to get off of here for a second and go reset something on my router, and then I'm going to be right back. So I'll be right back, Mason. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah, I mean, Ole Miss just really didn't show up to play this week, it seems like, at home against the Kentucky Wildcats, a Kentucky team that played Georgia really tough 2 weeks ago. Um, we it's so funny because we saw a mirror of what Kentucky did against Georgia a couple of weeks ago, come back and play Ole Miss the way that they did in such a similar fashion. They maintained possession, maintained the ball for like 3/4 of the time of this game. It was really incredible how Brock Vandagriff, who seems to get better week after week for Kentucky, and the way that he was able to extend drives in this game was really incredible. I mean, it really was. And then this Kentucky defense and this Kentucky defensive line in particular, the way that they were able to play in this football game to keep them in this football game against an Ole Miss offense that has been just absolutely lights out. I can't say enough. I mean, y'all tell me what you thought about this game, but it seemed like Kentucky didn't just come up with a win in this football game. It seemed like they were the better team. Like they were just more physical in this football game than Ole Miss was. That was really impressive. That was really, really impressive to see the physicality of this Kentucky football team going up against an Ole Miss team that, look, you can say what you want about Ole Miss and how they got all these players out of the transfer portal, yada, yada, yada. I don't want to hear it. This is a really good Ole Miss football team. And Kentucky comes out and plays like they belong in that football game, which nobody expected them to. I was apprehensive to bet on this game, but if you had me pick on this football game and bet on this football game, I would have picked Kentucky to win, or excuse me, I would have picked Ole Miss to win this football game pretty handedly. And Kentucky, credit them, they just come out and play a really good style of offense, really good style of defense for sure, and owned the lines of scrimmage. Like I said, Brock Vandagriff in this game was 18 of 28, 243 yards and a touchdown. Jackson Dart on the other side, similar stats: 18 of 27, 261 yards and a touchdown. I mean, almost identical stats from the two quarterbacks in this football game. Big loss for Ole Miss was Henry Parrish, as he goes down with an injury a couple of times. Wasn't able to tote the rock as many times as you probably would have liked later in the football game if you're Ole Miss. But you know, Sumo Carnbay comes in and plays pretty well. Had 11 carries, 47 yards on the game. And really, Kentucky just found different ways to run the football. They got Wimsatt involved. He had 9 carries, 26 yards. Wilcox, 7 carries, 23 yards. I mean, they just kept chopping away when it comes to running the football, and then had a few big plays from their receivers, particularly Dane Key had 8 receptions, 105 yards, and a touchdown, including a 24-yard touchdown there from Dane Key. Just really impressive with what they were able to do with these playmakers for Kentucky. I was really impressed. And then Trey Harris on the flip side for Ole Miss seemed to be carrying the weight and really putting this Ole Miss offense on its back. Had 11 carries, 176 yards, and a touchdown. The next best receiver for Ole Miss was the running back. Henry Parrish had 3 receptions for 18 yards. That was the difference in this football game to me, was just the way that Kentucky was able to limit this Ole Miss team, didn't give them time of possession. I thought it was a really good game plan from Kentucky, and it obviously led to them winning the football game. But this is Kentucky's football team. I mean, this is what they do. They limit possession. They score when they can, but ultimately they take the football out of the opposing offense's hands and rely on their defense. And that they did a really good job of that tonight. Comes back to a win for them in a hostile environment. Biggest win for Kentucky since I think like 1997 or something like that, especially on the road. Definitely the biggest win for Stoops in his career. I can't say enough about what Kentucky did in this football game today.
Yeah, dude. So I made some notes on this football game because I watched every waking minute of it, and it had me attached to it. And look, my kind of my grand overall, and I didn't really hear anything you were saying. I'm sorry, I had to go reset my router, but hopefully that looks a little bit better for you guys. I'm not skipping out, but look, Kentucky's defensive front is legit. We talked about it after we saw them play Georgia, and Kentucky fans told us in the offseason. We did a deep dive on Kentucky and their roster, and we were told by the Kentucky fans, like, hey, you're sleeping on our defensive line. And honestly, I kind of dismissed it. And once I saw it, I said, okay, I think Georgia's offensive line is struggling here, but I couldn't really. Was it all Georgia's offensive line, or was there something else going on here? And man, this defensive front is absolutely just legit. And I saw a lot of similarities between Ole Miss and Georgia whenever these teams face off against Kentucky. I saw a lot of similarities there. And the biggest similarity that I saw was both teams' inept ability to run the football in the football game. And I think Ole Miss and Georgia are a lot alike this season. I think they are a lot alike this season roster-wise and their strengths of their roster. I think that Ole Miss and Georgia are behind Alabama and Texas right now as far as the lines of scrimmage go. And I think that Georgia and Ole Miss both are a little bit behind as far as running in the running back room. I don't see, and you could kind of say the same for Texas. Texas has been kind of limited, but you haven't seen it in their production. They've ran the ball really, really effectively. Georgia and Ole Miss, though, I think have some deficiencies there on their offense as far as running the ball. And it's going to cost you against a team like Kentucky because if you're not running the football, they're going to get you in 3rd and long, and you're going to be in bad situations, just like Ole Miss was today, 1 of 10 on 3rd down. And those, I mean, look at these stats. They're almost identical to the Georgia game against Kentucky. It's almost identical. Now the difference, I think, a little bit for Ole Miss was you had a playmaker like Trey Harris. Georgia doesn't really have a Trey Harris, right? Georgia has a bunch of wide receiver twos, but not really like a wide receiver one like Trey Harris. So I think that's part of the reason Ole Miss scored a few more points in this football game. He had a good day, but Kentucky likes to muck the football game up, and don't look now, but Kentucky is starting to figure out identity on offense. You know, uh, Brock Vandegrift, it looked like it was never in a million years going to work for him after we watched that South Carolina game. We thought he was
Yes.
down and out, down for the count. And I, I'm going to have to hold on ESPN, Lee Corso, not so fast. This guy has got a chance, I think, to be able to figure things out with time. And while it's not going to be your conventional, you know, lineup and drop back and pass, and you're not going to be able to do all the normal things, but it's college football, man. You don't have to, you don't have to have an NFL pro style offense. That's not what you have to have here. Brock Vandegrift's a really tough runner, and I don't. I talked to you about it, but you guys that are watching live or Kentucky fans, I didn't know that the Rutgers quarterback. I can't even remember his name. So I could look up his stats and I'd know his name. But the quarterback that came over from Rutgers, the big old boy that came in and played quarterback, I like this idea. I'm not a big two quarterback system guy, but what Kentucky is doing with two running quarterbacks and letting them each take hits, like, I kind of like that. That kind of makes a little bit of sense to me because they're both really tough runners. They're both like massive humans. So, I mean, don't look now, but if Kentucky can figure out some kind of semblance of offense like we started to see in this game. Look, Dane Key finally got involved, right? Barry and Brown had the biggest catch of the game for Kentucky on that fourth down play. The balls on these coaches to call that call and the balls on Brock Vandegrift on fourth down. I mean, that's serious stuff there. That's some really, really gritty stuff. And that's what Kentucky's made of. They're made of grit. And boy, I tell you what, they really showed us. One of the things that you could attribute to the loss to for Ole Miss here in the first half of this football game, Ole Miss's secondary was holding on for their life. I mean, they were penalized over and over and over for pass interference on these Kentucky wide receivers. And the last thing that you want to do with an offense like Kentucky is give them free first downs. And they were just giving them free first down and 15 yards. Kentucky don't even hardly do 15 yards at a time. That's not this offense. But when you start giving it to them, they'll take it, and then they're going to bludgeon you to death and hit you with the quick passes and the rollouts, and you're going to be wore out after you play Kentucky. And Ole Miss's defensive line, they won at times, but I thought this was the best game that Kentucky's offensive line played as well. I thought Kentucky's offensive line played horrible against South Carolina, a little bit better against Georgia, and then this I think is their best game.
Yes.
They were able to open up some holes, and Brock Vandegrift was sacked a pretty good bit, but he was at least able to drop back and pass a little bit. Kentucky wins it 20-17. Crazy stuff, man. Really, really crazy stuff. This was part of what fueled. I knew it was going to be a crazy Saturday. I couldn't have predicted what happened in the Georgia game, but after I saw this game, I thought, oh boy, what are we in store for? And little did I know. I have to admit, I had to quit watching part of that Georgia game. You got anything else on Kentucky at Ole Miss?
No, I mean, I think it was a pretty clean game from both sides. No interceptions in this football game, no fumbles in this football game. Um,
Yeah.
I was just really impressed with what Kentucky did. I mean, typically you would say that if a team that's out of the top 25 were to beat a top 10 team, you would need a lot of those turnovers and a lot of those just chunk plays and things like that. That really wasn't the case in this football game. Kentucky came in and out physicaled an Ole Miss team that prides himself on defense and prides himself on the pass rush on defense and things like that. And they did sack the quarterback 5 times in this football game, which usually gets it done. But credit Kentucky and being able to play a perfect game really on offense to keep the ball away from Ole Miss and their offense, and just continue to move the chains. I think that was the biggest the biggest aspect of this game for Kentucky and why they were able to win the game. It's really impressive to me, from the Wildcats.
Well, I know it was an emotional victory for Stoops. I mean, I saw him after the football game, doing the post game interview, and I mean, he looked like he was going to be in tears. And we talked about it. He probably is still drinking bourbon at this point. Big victory, one of the biggest victories for Kentucky. It's I guess the early 2000s when they defeated LSU. That was the number one at that time. The first time they defeated Ole Miss at their place since I think 1978 or something
Yeah, it
like
was
that. I
something like
mean,
that. Yeah.
just unbelievable barriers being broken there. Big stuff for Kentucky. Kentucky's a better football team than what people realize. Um, if you said that a couple of weeks ago, people would have made fun of you, and they would have said you must be a Georgia fan. Um, but now you can only narrow it down to Georgia or Ole Miss. Out Louisville at Notre Dame. This was a game that I bet on. This was a game that you bet on. We did it on the betting show. And for those of you that may be new to First and Long College Football Show, we do a betting show every Thursday. It's called Between the Lines. I invite you to come and join us. It's every Thursday evening. Real quick show, and we give you our best bets of the week in college football. Louisville on the money line. We have to do a money line pick every week, and me and Mason both ended up on Louisville. If I could go back and do it again, I would do it the same. I'll quote Corey Smith on that one. I hope I don't get copyrighted. But totally different meaning here than the song. Notre Dame jumped out on top of Louisville 21-7 in this football game. And Notre Dame ends up winning 31-24, by the way. But they jump out 21-7 really, really early in this football game. And Louisville played their football game after that point. And without the turnovers and the quick points by Notre Dame, I just feel really, really good about Louisville in this matchup. I still think Louisville is the better football team. We have to respect what happens on the field, and we're going to do that whenever we do our top 25 rankings this week. And I totally get that. I respect the wins on the field, but if those teams play 10 times, I think Louisville's winning that football game at least 6 times, if not 7. They're the better football team, and statistically in this football game, they outgained Notre Dame by over 100 yards in this football game. It was the turnovers. It was absolutely the turnovers that allowed Notre Dame short fields to be able to score. I'm not in love with this Notre Dame offense in any way, shape, or form, but you got to tip your cap. It is a really good defense for Notre Dame, and they're figuring out ways to be able to win football games that match their personality. And so you got to kind of tip your cap there. But 3 turnovers, as I said, for Louisville in the first half was the difference. 2 fumbles, an interception. Held Notre Dame to 2 of 10 on third down and 117 rushing yards. If you would have told me before the game started that Louisville holds Notre Dame to 2 of 10 on third down and 117 rushing yards, I would have said I'm cashing in. What were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, you look at the stats, and it leans towards Louisville, winning this football game. I think similar to Georgia, it seems like Notre Dame came out, got a lead early, got a big lead early, 21 points in the first quarter. And Louisville is not the team that's just going to come back and win that type of football game. And it showed, and not to mention the turnovers. I think they had 3 fumbles, 1 interception in this football game. It certainly doesn't help. Notre Dame had a couple of fumbles themselves, but ultimately Louisville was not able to capitalize on their turnovers, and Notre Dame was. And against this defense, you can't have turnovers like that and expect to win the football game if you're Louisville. I still feel really good about Louisville in the ACC, and I feel like the ACC is wide open at this point. I think that Clemson has a really good chance to win the ACC. I think Miami has a really good chance, and I think that Louisville has a really good chance as well. Those are the three teams to me that have an opportunity to win the ACC at this point in the season. Um, I still feel really good about my pick with Louisville winning this football game. Just didn't quite go their way. Playing on the road at Notre Dame, tough environment, but ultimately, I think that Louisville was a better team. They should be able to hold their heads high going into the future weeks and feel like they've got a chance to beat everybody else on their schedule for the rest of the season.
They've got a chance. They've got a chance for sure. Tyler Shook, 24 of 41 in this one, 264 passing yards. That was 6.4 average there, just okay. 3 touchdowns and an interception. I mean, overall, you'll take the numbers minus the interception, right? And without the, like I said, the turnovers, they win. Louisville ran for 131 yards in this game. That was only 3.7 average. I mean, that's about what I would have expected against this Notre Dame defense, honestly, even though they were a little bit banged up going into this one. Ja'Cory Brooks and Colin Lacey. Colin Lacey, this was the first game back after his injury. He had 5 receptions, 71 yards. Ja'Cory Brooks, 5 receptions, 71 yards, had the exact same stats. Never do that again. But I like the prospect of this Louisville team. Louisville has SMU up next. SMU looked really good tonight against Florida State, or at least last I saw. We're going through the scores here. I'll kind of mention some of those games that are maybe not be so important, but I had money on SMU, so that's why I was paying attention to it. SMU's not a bad football team. They started the year off pretty rough, with Preston Stone at quarterback. They've made the move over to Jennings. I'm sure we'll probably talk at least a little bit about that game next week at some point, but that's going to be a tough game, right? And I'm looking at Louisville's schedule right now. You got to go to Clemson there November 2nd. You've got Miami at home there October 19th. So big games coming up. And I'm trying to look, where's the bye week for Louisville here? They already had their first bye week. So, yeah, it's a tough road to hoe here. SMU, Virginia, Miami, and it's at Virginia, and then at Boston College, and then at Clemson. Holy cow. That's pretty tough for Louisville. We'll see how they hang in there. I think they're a good football team, and at least this doesn't count as an ACC loss, right? That's I guess kind of the silver lining there. All right, what game do we want to go to next, man? You want to talk about Oklahoma State, Kansas State, or Virginia Tech, Miami? We got some good ones that we can talk about. Illinois at Penn State.
Yeah, let's go with Illinois at Penn State.
Let's do it. Hey, and thank y'all so much for watching. Hit the like button if you don't mind. It really helps us out, and we hope that you'll consider hitting the subscribe button as well. We've got live shows throughout the week, betting shows, all that good stuff. Have a real good time doing it. We're so glad that you're tuned in with us. Thank you. Illinois at Penn State. Penn State ends up winning this thing 21-7. My first note that I have written down here is rock fight. This turned into a rock fight, and Illinois makes a couple more mistakes. They kind of flinch first, I guess you could say, and had absolutely no ability to run the football in this football game. Illinois ran the ball 32 times for 34 yards. If you're doing the math at home, that's a good old 1.1 average, I think, something like that. Not good. I mean, it's going to be really, really tough to win a football game when 32 of your offensive plays go for 34 yards, right? The only spark that Illinois was able to really get was in the passing game with Luke Altmaier, and scoring 7 points. I wouldn't call that much of a spark. So, look, I mean, overall with this football game, Penn State did what Penn State typically does. I mean, they do it all the time, right? They strangled their opponent here. I'm interested to see what your thoughts are on this football game, because my thoughts were I felt like Penn State kind of reverted back to what we've seen from the past from Penn State in this football game. Like, we're just going to be content running the football. We're not going to throw it. We're not going to risk anything. Drew Aller had like 100 and something yards, like not very many yards at all. I thought it was more of what we've seen from Penn State in the past than what we've seen so far this year, where Penn State was number one in the country as far as average yards per pass going into this week at 12.6, which was nearly double what they were last year. So we had seen Kotelnicki and this offense really, we thought, take a step forward and air it out a little bit like Penn State fans have been crying for. And I felt like today was kind of reverting back, which, look, you can't complain when you run the ball for over 200 yards, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you run the ball for 240 yards, what's the point in passing the football and risking turning the football over? I think it was a good game plan by Penn State. When you watch this football game, the defense really just took the football game over. After the first quarter, Illinois scored a touchdown in that first quarter, and then after that, the Penn State defense just really settled in. They were able to really just shut down Illinois. And at that point, you got to think as an offense for Penn State, let's just hold on to the football, not turn the ball over, keep it on the ground, play possession, and win the football game. And that's exactly what they did. Second half outscored Illinois 14-0. I thought it was a pretty impressive outing by Penn State, particularly on the defensive side of the football. Abdul Carter just absolutely took this game over, had 7 tackles, 2 sacks, 4 tackles for a loss. Look, Penn State ended up with 7 sacks in this football game and 13 tackles for a loss. That was really impressive. That was a really good outing by this team. And I think that Penn State just really showed us what they are on defense. Finally, it seemed like this was the game where the defense really stood up and made a stand, throughout the entire football game for the most part, and gave their offense a chance to win. The offense played complementary football and said, hey, you guys are out there getting stops. We're just going to protect the football and run the football with efficiency. They did that, averaged over 5 yards per carry on the ground, and this was a Penn State clinic, and this is what they do to teams that are not in the top 3 in the Big Ten, it was pretty impressive. I thought against Illinois team that was kind of surging, and playing really well the past few weeks. I thought that Penn State did a good job of holding them off.
Well, if you watched the First and Long college football show last week, first of all, I'm sorry for a lot of ways, because I messed up a lot, but not with my predictions necessarily. It was more just technical difficulties that we had. But my point is, totally called this game this past week. The spread was like 18 in this game, so I called for Illinois to cover, for Penn State to win comfortably here, and I called for the under as well. All of those hit. It was a pretty predictable performance, I think, for Penn State in this one. And you're right. If it's not Ohio State or Michigan, Penn State's typically going to win the football game. Didn't necessarily cover the spread here, which goes along with kind of a trend over the last few years of spread against non-Ohio State or Michigan opponents. But with that being said, it was a comfortable win for Penn State. They move right along with with their Big Ten schedule. And Illinois, I don't think anybody really had Illinois as a Big Ten contender to begin with, but they played pretty well, I guess, considering the fact that they're just outmanned and outgunned in that situation. No doubt about it. That Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, they didn't stand a chance against this offense, and Penn State made them pay the price today for sure. All right, let's jump into another one here. If y'all want to talk about something, there's a link in the live chat. Did you put a link in the description, Mason, by chance?
Yeah, I did. Yep.
All right, so there's a link in the description as well. You're more than welcome to come on the show and come chit chat with us. Tell us. We'll talk about whatever game you want to talk about. I watched most of them. I mean, obviously, I can't watch every single one of them, but I typically watch 2 or 3 at a time at least. Let's talk about that.
Quick score update, real quick. Arizona is up 16-3 over Utah. Utah's playing at home, and it seems like Arizona's kind of putting it on them right now. Isaac Wilson comes in at quarterback. Cam Rising unable to go in this football game. We've said it all season long, but when Cam Rising's not able to go, it's anybody's game. I mean, Utah really relies on this quarterback, and they're in a fight right now. Against an Arizona team that has been kind of lower middle of the pack for the Pac-12, the Big 12, and Utah struggling right now.
Yeah, Utah just got Arizona to jump off sides there. I'll try to keep. I have it turned on here, so I'll try to keep everybody updated here. But yeah, I mean that would be obviously a massive upset. Arizona is not a team that I've been particularly impressed with this season. We watched them get absolutely bludgeoned by Kansas State, who we're going to talk about here in just a minute. Kansas State had a big victory today. But 3rd and 3 here for Utah as they've got the football handed off, first down, crossing over the 51-yard line, the 49-yard line, first down. Look, Utah struggles to score points when they don't have Cam Rising. I mean, it is what it is at this point. And yeah, your defense, has held Arizona to 16 points, and that should be plenty in this football game. But yet you're down 13. And I talked about it 2 weeks ago or last week, whenever Utah beat Oklahoma State. I said they got away with it this week, but not going to be able to do this week in and week out. You're going to get playing football like this. And, I hate it, man. How is Cam Rising still not? I mean, I don't know, man. I've had stitches before. I've never been down this long from stitches. I mean, I just did he rip his finger all the way off? I just don't get it. I mean, I just saw his hands on TV just now, not even bandaged up or anything. I don't know, man. I don't know. I get sick of why do I keep betting on Utah games? I have no idea. Let's talk about Oklahoma State at Kansas State since we're on the Big 12 subject matter here. Oklahoma State at Kansas State. This was honestly like a playoff elimination game here, because whoever was to lose this football game more likely is not going to win the Big 12, and with 2 losses out of the Big 12, almost a 0% chance that you'll be making the playoffs. Kansas State wins this one 42-20. Look, Avery Johnson started this game off a little rocky, and I've seen him do this a bunch of times throughout his short career. Once he gets going, if he can get into a football game and get acclimated and get a couple of throws under his belt, he's a guy that seems to like get on a heater. He really, really gets in a rhythm and gets on a heater, and it seems like he can get the edge whenever he wants. He's so damn fast. He's so fast, so quick. The upside is just through the roof for this guy. He just has to eliminate the mistakes, the young man mistakes, like the interception early in this football game, and then he'll make a boneheaded decision, and then the very next minute he'll make a top 10 quarterback in the game type play, right? So it's just the inconsistencies with Avery Johnson that leave any wiggle room for this Kansas State team being, tops in the Big 12 and, just being top 3 or 4 team in the Big 12. Now, early on in this football game, it looked like Oklahoma State was going to be able to run the football, and Kansas State made a quick adjustment, and I'm certainly glad they did because Ollie Gordon started getting going, and it was like, oh no, here we go. If Oklahoma State's going to be able to run the football, who knows what they're going to be able to do? Kansas State shut that down real quick, made the offense. I saw wide receivers making some plays in this football game. I was really excited to see that for Kansas State. That's something I kind of harped on last week. Not a lot of playmakers in this offense. The running backs were getting a lot of the catches. DJ did his today. That's what I called for Kansas State to do this week, run the football first. DJ Giddens is an NFL running back, if anybody hasn't figured that out yet. He's a future NFL running back. Maybe not a first-round running back or something. That nobody hardly takes him first round no more. But what did you think about this football game? I feel like Kansas State is growing before our eyes. And they're not a finished product. They're one of these teams that, like many teams, there's been some changes roster-wise, coaching-wise over the offseason. Minor changes in some cases, more major in other cases. But they're growing week by week. And I still don't think we've seen Kansas State put every single facet of the football game together. But if we do see that, or when we see that, it's going to be a scary thing. I think that they have a lot of potential to be really, really good out of the Big 12 Conference, and especially if Utah continues to play football without Cam Rising. What do you think about this one?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty scary to think that Kansas State still has not played their best football game. They still have not played a complete football game so far this season. The Arizona game came pretty close, to playing a complete football game and playing, for 60 minutes straight. But the Kansas State, the potential here for this team is through the roof, especially when you talk about the Big 12 and the parity that is throughout this conference. I think that Kansas State is clearly in a position where, they could win the rest of these football games through the Big 12, win the Big 12. But I was just really impressed with this offensive outing from the Wildcats here. Had no idea that they could score 42 points against this Oklahoma State defense, which has had some holes, but is an experienced group at the end of the day. I was really impressed with Kansas State, what they were able to do. And then on the defensive side of the football, they rushed the quarterback well. They had a really good game plan against Oklahoma State, limited Ollie Gordon to just 76 yards. This was the third game in a row, I believe, if not the fourth in a row, where he was held to under 100 yards rushing. So I think that the game plan is out there to face Oklahoma State and beat Oklahoma State. You limit Ollie Gordon and you really play against Alan Bowman and trust that your defenders are going to be able to hold up against him in the passing attack. It's worked for some teams. It hasn't worked for others, but the better teams have been able to win with that game plan. And I think that Oklahoma State on the flip side is really going to have to dig deep and find a way to strategize around that, because that's the game plan against the Cowboys right now. And until they can stop it, that's what teams are going to be able to do, or are going to try to do, until the Pokes have an answer for that.
Absolutely. That is exactly what I said on the reaction show after the Oklahoma State and Utah game. I said, everybody who's playing Oklahoma State this season just got that film. They just saw that. They're going to rewatch all that film. They're going to recycle it. They're going to regurgitate their best imitation of what, Utah was able to do in that football game. And lo and behold, I think Kansas State was able to do that. And then Kansas State was actually able to score some points. So look, I want to give Avery Johnson his flowers. I mean, he absolutely tore it up in the second half. This team did everything that they needed to do there. I would say second quarter on. The first quarter, it was kind of feeling each other out. I mean, some of my notes here, Oklahoma State was winning in the first quarter on a lot of matchups, and Kansas State was able to make those adjustments, and that's what college football is about. You got to be able to make those adjustments in game And I thought Kansas State was really, really good at that this past Saturday at noon. There at home. Big game still on the schedule for Kansas State, but this was one of the bigger ones to get back behind you. Big dub here for the Kansas State Wildcats, and it'll go a long way to getting to where they want to go in the Big 12. All right, let's keep it moving here. Thank you all so much for watching. If you could hit that thumbs up, that would help us out so much. I appreciate it. And comment. Let us know what you thought about the games. What did you think about that Georgia-Alabama game? Unbelievable stuff. Come join the show. Link in the chat there, the live chat. Link in the description. Just follow the link. Turn your camera off. We're not going to put your face on the video. We're not doing that. But we will put your audio on, and we can chit-chat just like a phone call or something. Would love to have you. Virginia Tech at Miami. Let's talk about this one. This was one of my favorite games of the weekend. Minus obviously the Georgia game, which was not one of my favorites. It actually made me physically sick there for a little bit. Friday night, though, Virginia Tech at Miami. Miami wins 38-34. Talk about a game that came right down to the end. I mean, the magnitude of the football game wasn't quite Georgia-Alabama, but the end of the football game actually was eerily similar. Look, Cam Ward's turnovers early got Miami down by 10 in the first half. Offense was moving the ball and likely to score on both of the drives that ended in turnovers, right? Miami's wide receivers were just all over the place. Miami's wide receivers are unbelievable, man. I mean, I come away, I knew that already, but then I came away from the game after watching that just like, wow. I mean, Restrepo is unreal. Jacoby George, while I don't love his attitude on the football field, man, he is something else out there, and he fits in really well. And it seems like all these wide receivers and Cam Ward have a really good relationship. Like, Cam Ward is not afraid to tell them anything. He didn't mind snatching them up to the side on the sidelines. You know, I just saw a lot of good things from Cam Ward in this football game, minus the interceptions, which really, really costed his team here. But look, ultimately, Virginia Tech gets overzealous with the lead and decides to try to fake a field goal for absolutely no good reason in this football game. Virginia Tech, I don't know, and look, I'm seeing this all over college football. It's an absolute plague. The analytics are ruining college football. Numbers are ruining coaches' decisions. Like Lane Kiffin today. Well, the so and so tells me to go for it. What are these teams paying you guys millions of dollars to do then? If all of your decisions are already preconceived before the game starts, and well, if I get in this situation, I'm going for it. No, you got to feel the game out. Virginia Tech would have had a 13-point lead if they would have kicked the field goal rather than fake it. They would have been up by 13, and you think, well, that's a point less than 2 touchdowns. Yeah, but then Miami scores a touchdown and kicks a field goal. And so then you're sitting there thinking, well, gosh, I wish we would add this field goal because Virginia Tech would have won the football game. It was all downhill from there, too. As soon as Miami stopped that fake field goal, it was all downhill. Terrible clock management from Virginia Tech at the end of the game. Not properly using timeouts. Slow as hell to get lined up on the ball. Long developing plays when there's a minute left in the football game. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Why are you rolling out and running 52 yards wide whenever you've got a minute left? It didn't make any sense. And then Brent Pry at one point waits an extra 25 seconds before he calls his timeout. What are you doing? It was absolutely asinine. And what it ended up being is a Hail Mary towards the end zone, originally called a touchdown. We talked about this today. I think the refs just called that a touchdown just because I think that's kind of like what their protocol is if they don't see something. Call it a catch or whatever, and we'll go back and review it. Well, when you went back and reviewed that thing, you couldn't see much. So it was, I mean, they reviewed that sucker for a good 6-7 minutes there and came back out on the field, said it was incomplete, no touchdown. Miami wins the football game. that close. Miami was that close to taking a loss at home to Virginia Tech, and that was the very first time there was any semblance of an audience that I've ever seen at a Miami football game. It wasn't full, but it was a lot more full than what it normally was. Um, Catastrophe averted for Miami. Virginia Tech, I think, played like the team that we thought they probably were in the preseason, right? I think a lot of people thought Virginia Tech was going to be better. I think we saw them play a little bit more like that team than what we've seen this season against Boston College and against Vanderbilt. But, I mean, this is a Virginia Tech team that lost to Vanderbilt, Mason, and, taking Miami to the wire. What do you make of this?
Yeah, I mean, it really was a close game all the way through. I thought that Miami played really good on the back half of this football game, and almost lost it at the very end with some questionable calls, I think. But obviously Virginia Tech did lose it at the end of the game. They had a chance to win this football game, to put it to put Miami to sleep, and they mismanaged the clock and made all kind of mistakes. But at the end of the football game, I thought that the right decision or the right call was made in that it was not a touchdown. I don't think that the Virginia Tech receiver came down with the football at the end of the football game. But at the same time, I don't know how you call it a touchdown on the field and then see what we saw in the end zone and then reverse the call. I don't really understand that either.
I didn't
but
get that.
But when you watch it live, I can't conclude that it was a touchdown. It was just one of those gray area type plays, I guess, where you don't really have a clear stance on what happened. But I had a feeling that it was going to come down to the ruling on the field standing in the end zone, it being a touchdown for Virginia Tech, Miami losing this football game. I'm kind of glad that they didn't, because I do feel like Miami is a team that is much better than Virginia Tech, and they just kind of didn't play like it. I think that the better team won in this football game, but questionable call nonetheless. It was a really exciting game, like you said, one of the best of the weekend.
Yeah, and look, I don't make like a ton of this football game. Like I said, I think Virginia Tech played one of their better games of the year, and had no idea that Cam Ward and Kyron Drones were cousins. First of all, until
Right.
that game
Right.
started. So both guys from the Houston area there. What did concern me though was Miami's ability to block the edge rushers of Virginia Tech. And I know there's that really badass defensive end there at Virginia Tech. He's got like 7 or 9 sacks or something this season, and he went out for a part of this game. I can't remember his name for some reason, but anyway, Miami's edge, their tackles there on the offensive line, it was a little questionable. It was touch and go at some points throughout that football game, and Cam Ward's got an inept ability to be able to scramble around or move around in the pocket, and it really helped Miami out a lot in this one. But a couple of their offensive linemen went down in this football game, so that's going to be something that we're going to kind of have to like really, really watch. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about the competitive depth there. Something we'll just kind of have to watch as the week goes on. And then another thing that was concerning to me for Miami, and something that we really need to look at going forward, is Virginia Tech's ability to get the edge in this football game. Tootin had 200, and I said that right, Tootin. My sons thought it was hilarious that there was a running back named Tootin. I know he hates that. But my last name was Carter, and people said Farter, so I feel his pain. I bet nobody makes fun of his name to his face. But he had 206 yards rushing in this football, and it was all off the edge. In Miami, the outside linebackers, there was really nothing they could do about it in this football game. So, that's kind of concerning to me. I mean, it's not like it's not like they just ran for 120 yards. I mean, they ran for 206, and that is a little bit concerning to me. So, the edges there, offensive line, defensive line, kind of outside linebacker area. I think those are kind of something to watch for Miami as we go on. And yeah, yeah, great game, great game. Virginia Tech was very, very close. Miami got very lucky. There's zero doubt about that in my mind. I wanted to say a couple other games that were on Friday real quick while we're on Friday. And then these are not like amazing games or anything, but Rutgers ends up beating Washington in a Big Ten matchup there, 21-18. Won me some money. If you watched the betting show, you knew to bet Rutgers -2. I told you to do it. And if you're not tuning into the betting show on Thursday, then you're just not that interested in making any money. And I need Utah to do their thing, and I will end up well over 500 for the week. And then Army absolutely spanked Temple this past Friday on the road. And I think we're going to have to sit our kids down and have a discussion about Army being a top 25 team. Because I'm telling you right now, you go watch Army's quarterback. I can't even remember that guy's name. I don't need to know his name. They don't put their names on the back of their jerseys, so they obviously don't want me to know their name. But man, they can run it. They can throw it. They are athletic. They will hit your ass. I am really, really impressed. I know Temple is not like, toast of the, non-power floor or anything this season, but Army absolutely laid the wood. And if you look at some defensive statistics and things like that for Army, I mean, they're up in the tops of the country in a lot of statistics. By the way, looks like Utah just scored a touchdown, just kicked it off to Arizona. Oh, that kickoff's coming back anyway. But they ran it out to about the 40-yard line there. 16-10. Arizona's up. 11:44 left in the fourth quarter. As I said, Arizona just got the ball on a kickoff there. Trying to keep you guys posted as we watch this thing. Really need Utah to figure something out really quick. Maybe bring Cam Rising in. That sounds like a good idea to me.
Yeah, I think that would work.
That would be all right. You want to talk about Oklahoma Auburn? Because this was
let's do it.
That was actually a pretty fun football game. Oh, and we got to talk about Arkansas and Texas A&M, Mason. So let's don't forget to talk about that one because that's always a good football game. And this was the last time that one was played at Jerry World, by the way. That's going to be home and homes from now on. No more neutral site. So last time we got to see that one there at the Dallas Cowboy Stadium. Let's talk about Oklahoma and Auburn. All right. So in case you guys missed it, because, it was not everybody was watching Oklahoma Auburn. I can totally understand that. Oklahoma rallies late for their first SEC conference win. Kip Lewis, the linebacker, returned an interception for 61 yards for the game-winning touchdown. Michael Hawkins goes soaring through the air, flipping through the air like he likes to do, going into the end zone there for the 2-point conversion. Made it 24-21. Oklahoma ends up kicking another field goal there at the end of the game, basically at the end of the game to make it 27-21, which was your final score for this one. Auburn does line up to throw a Hail Mary, but Peyton Thorne doesn't exactly have the gas in the motor to get the ball to the end zone. And yet again, Mason, we get to the post game of this, and I listen, I haven't went and listened to everything yet. I haven't had time, but Hugh Freeze again talking, pretty much putting his quarterback down. After this football game, he comes out and says that it was like a backhanded type thing, like, oh, it was my fault that he didn't know what to do in that situation. He didn't know how to handle that situation, and I got to be more clear with him on what he needs to do there, and blah, blah, blah. Talking about the interception, I guess. And my thing is like, well, this is like a multi-year guy. This isn't a freshman. This isn't Hank Brown we're talking about. This was Peyton Thorne, a guy who's been in your system and has been around college football for a while. And I just know that if I was Peyton Thorne and I heard my coach say that would absolutely just crawl under my skin. But, it is what it is. I mean, Peyton Thorne threw the dagger, that that was stuck through the heart of Auburn here at home, and it was a big time loss. Um, the Oklahoma offense they largely struggled throughout this whole game, but the last two offensive drives were 4 plays, 67 yards, and a touchdown, and then a field goal. So it was enough to be able to get it done in this football game. We had the under in this game, thinking that it would be a defensive game, and then lo and behold, the defensive pick six there kind of busted us on the under there for the game that was set at 45. But Oklahoma played really well when it mattered in this football game, which was the fourth quarter. Their defense really surprised me today, Mason, though. Oklahoma's defense gave up well over 300 yards passing. And that was surprising to me. That was a little bit uncharacteristic, I felt like, for this Oklahoma defense. Now, they're missing some pieces on that back end, especially there at nickelback, and I know that. But Auburn was able to move the ball through the air. Oklahoma did their thing stopping Auburn running the football, I thought, pretty well, and were able to just hang in there like a hair in a biscuit, waiting for their chance. And whenever they got it, they made their move, and Oklahoma wins this one. What do you think about the fallout of this one from Oklahoma? They're going into a bye week, and then they're going to play Texas. This is momentum that they absolutely needed. And it seems like Oklahoma's found their quarterback now in Michael Hawkins. And then Auburn now has to turn around and go to Georgia and play the Georgia Bulldogs. What do you think this means for each team, and what did you think about this football game?
Yeah, I mean, I thought Hawkins played pretty well. 230 yards overall of total offense, 69 on the ground with a touchdown as well. No touchdowns through the air, no interceptions through the air. So he protected the football pretty well. And I thought that Oklahoma showed some grit, to win this football game. Auburn scores 14 late in the second half there, and it really felt like Auburn had figured something out on offense against a really good Oklahoma defense so far this year. And boy, that defense just kind of showed up in the second half and limited Auburn to just 7 points. They outscore Auburn 20-7 in the second half, and I feel like OU is kind of finding its rhythm, on offense. This was a really big win on the road in the Plains, the first road test in the SEC for Oklahoma, and they answered the bell in a really profound fashion after coming off the loss to Tennessee last week, in a game that you feel like Oklahoma really felt. It really felt like Oklahoma could hold their head up high in the loss to Tennessee, and they come out and play a really gritty game against Auburn, and kind of a reeling Auburn team at this point. Both teams kind of backs against the wall in a sense in this football game, and OU is able to find a way to get it done against the Tigers at Jordan Hare. I really feel like Oklahoma is kind of trending up on the offensive side of the football. Defense is still playing as good as they have in recent weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. Arizona with the ball here, fourth quarter, 9 minutes, 41 seconds, 16-10. I see Oregon is up 28-13 in the third over UCLA in that one. All right. Yeah, Mason, look, as far as Oklahoma is concerned, their book is far from being finished written for this season. I think they're another football team that, they're just now figuring out any kind of sort of identity on offense. Michael Hawkins is going to be able to help Oklahoma out in the run game. And that's a big deal because you had to figure out a way to supplement that from Jackson Arnold and Dylan Gabriel, going back to last year. The quarterback being able to run the football and have production running the football has been important for this Oklahoma offense over the last couple of years. So Michael Hawkins been able to come in and run the football as fearlessly as he does is while I hope it doesn't get him hurt because it's a long season, he had half the rushing yards himself today. So this Oklahoma offense is going to need him to, be able to pick up the passing offense as they go here, but they're going to need him to be able to pick up some yards with his feet, and he's done pretty well at that so far. I don't think we've seen the best of the Oklahoma offense so far this season. Is my point. We haven't seen the best of this Oklahoma offense yet. The offensive line is what it is at this point. I think there's things that you don't like about it, and look, I mean, Oklahoma's going to have to figure out a way to scheme around that, and I think you got a guy that's mobile enough that can roll out. You're just going to have to scheme around it. It is what it is at this point. So, the wide receivers are amazing for Oklahoma. You got to figure out a way to get them more involved, and I know some of them are banged up at this point, but Bauer Sharp is a good piece. You just got to get more guys involved in the passing game, and that defense, I think, is going to be able to figure it out. They're good against the run, not so great against the pass today, but I don't think it's the best rendition of their full roster with the guys they had injured after the Tennessee football game there. All right, let's kind of just run through some of these other ones here. Admittedly, I didn't really watch this football game. Texas wins 35-13 over Mississippi State. Let's kind of look at some of the stats there in that one. 522 total yards for Texas in that one, 324 yards passing. Yeah, that's Arch Manning. 10.5 yards per pass, 198 yards rushing. I'm not really understanding why that game was so close for so long, though. That game was, we kept looking at the score just like, what's going on here?
Yeah, it looks like Jaden Blue had 2 fumbles lost probably earlier in the football game, and maybe that's why it was such a close game.
Yeah, 14-6 there at halftime. Texas was up, and this is not a Mississippi State defense that really anybody holds in high regard. So, I don't know. You make of that what you will. I guess you don't really make a whole lot of it. But it was an interesting football game, at least through the first half there. Arch Manning does his thing. Let's pull up his stats real quick. We got to say Arch Manning several times so that the algorithm will pick it up. 26 of 31, 324 yards, 2 touchdowns. Nice day. Nice day for Mr. Arch Manning. As far as rushing goes, that's always what I look at when I go to Texas is their rushing categories because they're just a little thin, right, at the running back room. So I always go and check that out. Wisner there, 6.8 average. He had 13 carries, 88 yards. Jaden Blue, 6 carries, 36 yards, which was good for 6 yards a pop. So minus the fumbles, decent day running the football there. Texas wins 35-13 at home against Mississippi State. Conference victory there, so puts Texas right where they need to be. And let's see, we talked about Alabama, Georgia. Ohio State beats Michigan State 38-7. I thought Michigan State would be able to score at least another touchdown or so, but not able to do it. Ohio State's too much in that one. Minnesota, Michigan. Minnesota somehow started coming back on Michigan in this one. Thought Michigan was up big, but Michigan ends up winning 27-24. What's going on in this football game? Okay, nothing. Arizona's still got the ball, folks, 16-10. 3rd and 11 here. They've got Utah down to their own 35 here. Drop back. Fafita scrambling, passing downfield to the end zone. Touchdown. Number 88, tight end, back of the end zone. Holy moly. 35-yard receiving touchdown. Arizona's going to be up 22-10, pending the extra point or 2-point, whatever they decide to do here. Probably go for 2. Holy cow. Looks like Utah's going down, folks.
Wow.
What do you think about that, Mason? I mean, good Lord. This Big 12. See, the whole reason I betted plus the points with Oklahoma State this week was because of a reason like this. I was like, well, the Big 12 is just super competitive. I feel like all these teams are going to be like really, really close, right? As far as the scores and those top 3, 4 teams. Um, but man, I really just did not expect Arizona to be able to flex on Utah like this. Unbelievable. And that wasn't even Tetaroa McMillan. That was the tight end there. Wow. All right, guys, let's keep it going. I'll keep you updated on that football game as we go on here. We still got a little bit of time left in that one, so we'll see if Utah's able to get the football back and do anything. Gonna be relying on Isaac Wilson to be able to do it if they do. USC takes out Wisconsin 38-21. I believe USC scored like 28 unanswered points in this one. Really, really surprising. Struggling there with Wisconsin early, able to throttle up, and it was a nice decided victory there. I mentioned the Michigan at Minnesota game. Khalil Mullins does his thing. Khalil Mullins is the best thing that Michigan's got going on their offense. There's zero doubt about that. He continues to do his thing in that one. Takes down Minnesota. Surprised it was even that close, to be honest with you. Minnesota is pretty bad considering they lost to North Carolina this year. Yuck. LSU 42-10 over South Alabama. That's as much as we'll say about that. Clemson 40-14 over Stanford. Let's look at Clemson's stats real quick. Since Clemson's a team that's going to be in the discussion at the end of the season for the ACC Conference Championship. The more and more I watch this team, it looks like Cade Klubnik threw for 5 touchdowns in this one. It looks like Clemson is figuring out some semblance of offense, right? Lincoln Riley's brother, or whatever the hell his name is, the other Riley, they look just alike. Garrett, that's right. It seems like he's starting to get it figured out a little bit. Now, for Cade Klubnik is not good. 4 touchdowns through the air. Looks like he had 1 on the ground as well. 7 carries for 48 yards. Clemson sure does love to run the quarterback, don't they? Yeah, they do. Phil Moffitt, 10 carries, 58 yards, 5.8 average. They're starting to figure out a little semblance of offense. This is what I like to look at, though. Clemson's wide receiver room has just been awful the last few years. Bryant Wesco is a freshman, number 12 on the offense, 2 receptions, 104 yards. All of a sudden, he seems to be like the go-to for this Clemson offense. Antonio Williams, he's a nice supporting piece. Brendan Sewell kind of quiet in this one, 2 receptions, 8 yards. He's typically a go-to guy for this offense. That was really a big piece of what this Clemson offense was missing, somebody that can bust it wide open. And it seems like so far Bryant Wesco, the freshman, is the only one that's able to really, really do that. But nice win there for Clemson, 40-14 over Stanford, which, of course, is now a conference game because of our weird realignment stuff that we've done over the last few years. So, conference win against Stanford. That sounds so weird. Iowa State, 20-0 over Houston. Arizona just kicked the ball off to Utah, touchback. We'll keep you posted there. About to get the ball back on offense here and get going. So, see what Utah can do. We talked about Kansas State. We talked about that. BYU at Baylor. Is BYU for real? Or is that where we're at? Or where we need to consider BYU being for real? 34-28 over Baylor. Let's look at those stats real quick. Because last week, BYU beat Kansas State, and their stats didn't match the victory or the scoreboard. 367 total yards for BYU. Baylor had 387. 216 passing yards, 151 rushing there. 4 of 13 on third down. Let's look at this quarterback. Retzlaff. Jake Retzlaff, 17 of 31, 216 yards. 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Not great. Not great. Sawyer Robertson for Baylor, 27 of 48. Baylor threw the ball 48 times. Yikes. Because they ran the ball for 2.3 yards per carry. Yikes. Terrible stuff there. BYU gets the win. It's a conference win there. big deal for BYU, and I guess we have to really consider BYU actually being a top 25 team for real, which we already had them in our top 25 last week, but we got to really consider them to be something that people got to deal with. Arkansas at Texas A&M. This was a really good football game, and it typically is a good football game. Now I know that Texas A&M is like 12-1 in the last 13 here, but this is typically one of my favorite football games to watch this week of the year. Now this week it was Georgia and Alabama, obviously, but this one played at Jerry World. Texas A&M wins 21-17. Let's look at some of the stats. Marcel Reed throws for 2 touchdowns, runs for another. Let's see here. I wanted to look at some of the teams that Taylon Green, 23 of 41, 279 yards. Taylon Green also carried the ball 13 times for 6 yards. Ugh, yuck. But he had a 24-yard rush. So you got to remember in college football they include sacks in those carries, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. They need to stop it with that. But as I said, Texas A&M gets the win here. Marcel Reed, 11 of 22, 163 yards, 7.4 yards rushing. He ran the ball 10 times for 13 yards, had a long of 13 in a touchdown there. Texas A&M still trying to figure out how to play offense with this football team. I don't know if Connor Wegman's coming back. I don't know if it matters, right? I really don't know if it matters. Noah Thomas, leading receiver today. Cyrus Allen gets a catch. I mean, for this offense to really be what they needed to be, Cyrus Allen was going to have to kind of pan out, right? A guy you get through the transfer portal. That was going to have to pan out if you were going to be able to be successful with this offense this year. And, 38 carries for 134 yards rushing. That's good for 3.5. Texas A&M just does not have much of an offense, and luckily they were able to lean on their defense in this one and strangle out Arkansas, who goes to 3-2. Texas A&M they went to 4-1. The only loss being at home there to Notre Dame. That loss looks better and better every week. Notre Dame keeps pulling these wins out of their behind. It's making Texas A&M look even better. And if Texas A&M, they're one of these teams, if they can just figure out some semblance of offense and just kind of go with their identity here and embrace, whatever they need to do to be a stopgap for the 2024 season, they need to do it. They just need to do it. That's the last piece for this team. I mean, the defense is good enough to definitely hang in there with most of their competitors there in the SEC. All right, 23-10. Arizona. Arizona's got the ball. I must have missed something. There. Unless Utah had to punt it back. 6:36 left. Yep, Utah had to punt it back. Got it in the 4th and 8. So it's 23-10. Arizona's got the football. Running with the football. Looks like it's 2nd and 8. 6:13 left. Guys, that's about it for me tonight. I'm going to get off of here. I'm going to finish watching this Utah game. Excuse me, I was not looking at the correct time there. Oh, wait. Now they're changing the time. Clock operator looks like they're having a hard time. Guys, we've got live shows coming on this week. We've got tomorrow night. We'll have our early thoughts segment that we always do. We'll look at all the awesome matchups that we've got coming up. Let's actually go look at some of those matchups real quick, because I was interested as far as which ones we've got coming up. I know we've got some really good conference matchups. Mason, you good over there, buddy?
Yeah, man. Just had to take a little break for a minute. Sorry about that. Sorry to leave you hanging there.
Oh, that's all right, man. Yeah, I was just pulling up the schedule for next week. I'd kind of went over the Arkansas Texas A&M game there. Low scoring affair there. but I was trying to invite all these good folks to come hang out with us next week, as we've got some obviously big matchups like we always do in college football. Mizzou at Texas A&M. Hey, I just got done talking about Texas A&M. That's going to be the A&M defense against that Mizzou offense is going to be strength on strength there. Missouri presents some opportunities, on their defense for Texas A&M to maybe spread those wings a little bit and figure out what this offense is all about. I haven't been great at throwing the football around. Missouri seems to be susceptible in that department. That one will be at noon next week. I'm sure that'll be one that we talk about. Scanning down through here, Auburn at Georgia. I'm sure we'll talk about that one some, probably on the betting show. We'll who knows what to think about that Auburn at Georgia game right this second. I got to wrap my head around what I just saw from Georgia in that Alabama game tonight. Ole Miss at South Carolina. Ole Miss coming off the loss there to Kentucky. South Carolina's a lot better than what people think they are. They're another team this season that is really growing into their offense, right? They started off really strong defensively, and now they're starting to grow into their offense a little bit. And if they can get healthy offensively, watch out, because I'm telling you, South Carolina, along with Kentucky, if they can figure out what their identity is, I think South Carolina is a little better on offense than Kentucky is right now.
Right.
But if they can both figure out their identities, we know what they can do defensively, and that's disrupt. Very, very disruptive football teams. Ole Miss will have their hands full as they go on the road to Williams-Brice there at 3:30 next week. Let's see.
South Carolina's built almost exactly like Kentucky, which Ole Miss just fell to at home. Now they got to go on the road to Columbia to play South Carolina. That's a tough matchup for Ole Miss.
And that's what look. And I'm not saying that Texas or Oklahoma ain't ready for the SEC. I'm not saying that at all. But that's what people don't fail to realize whenever you're talking about SEC and coming in and playing an SEC schedule. It's those games that you don't realize how hard they're going to be. You just don't understand. It's not the fact that you got to go play Kentucky. It's the fact that you got to play Kentucky and then turn around and go play South Carolina and then turn around and go play so-and-so. It wears on you. It wears on you. And there's so many different types of football teams in the SEC. There's a bunch of them that do totally different things. It's a wild, wild football league, and teams like South Carolina and Kentucky are a big part of the reason why the SEC is so wild, because every 3 years, one of those teams has a pop year, and you just don't know when it's going to be. And they just might win 10 games all of a sudden, 8 to 10 games. We've seen Kentucky do it. I haven't seen South Carolina do it as much, but I think this is the best team we've seen South Carolina have in a while. Let's see. Clemson at Florida State. Oh, my gosh. Clemson is going to beat Florida State to death next week. Oh, my gosh.
They're a 2-touchdown favorite right now.
Oh, my gosh. They're going to beat them to death next week, dude. They want to beat them so bad after last year. Oh, my goodness gracious. That's going to be a bloodbath there at 7 p.m. Tallahassee, Florida. If you want to go watch it live, I'm sure you can probably get 2-for-1 tickets or a free hot dog or something. They'll be doing anything they can to get the seats filled up over there. Speaking of which, Mason, that's not a game that we talked about, SMU at Florida State, but did you catch the final of that one, Mason? SMU at Florida State? Florida State at SMU? I didn't catch the final there, but SMU was whooping that ass.
42-16 was the final.
Woo!
Yeah.
So if you watched the Best Bet show, you would have known to take SMU. That was one of my wins for the day. SMU had everything to prove in that football game, y'all. SMU is a football program that just took an invitation to go into a conference, or basically kind of asked for an invitation to a conference and said, keep the money for the next few years. We don't even want the money. We'll come on in there for free. We've got all the money we need right here. And that's the type of program you're dealing with SMU. It's not your typical team coming up from, the AAC or whatever. No. This is a rich program and historically rich program. You know, minus the death penalty, right? If it wasn't for the death penalty, who knows what our thoughts on SMU would be in current day. Um, they're in a talent-rich area there in Texas. Winning this game against Florida State this week, there was so many donations on the line there in Dallas. If SMU was able to win that football game, the amount of money that was going to pour in and is going to pour into the SMU program now is really, really remarkable. SMU, they're not there yet. They're not there yet. Give them a couple of years. I guarantee you they'll be competing for an ACC championship. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that they will be. All right, Mason. Anything else to wrap up this week? One more thing. I want to get this off my chest because I don't want to carry this into next week, and I don't want to talk about it next week, really, because we'll be so busy doing other stuff, even though that wasn't the best matchups in the world. But I know there's other good matchups to talk about. Tennessee at Arkansas, we'll talk about that one. But a couple of notes that I made from this week. First of all, the refs suck. Okay. The refs in college football are absolutely and totally ridiculous and out of control. That it's sickening. It's unbelievable. And college football's got to do something. You know, these guys that are like, you know, elementary school or middle school PE teachers during the week, and then they're flying out to the nation's biggest games for the weekend, you know, or the guy that's got the corner law office there, do we screw him and how, you know, and then he comes into town for the weekend to call the Georgia Alabama game, which I'm not harping on the Georgia Alabama game. I just use that as an example. I didn't have, there was a few calls, but every game has calls that are really, really, really bad right now. And refs that are just absolutely taking over the games. And it's annoying. It's disruptive. None of the teams can get any kind of rhythm. A lot of it is nitpicky stuff, very nitpicky stuff, and inconsistent across the board, you know, and it's just, look, I'm not like a union guy or anything, but these refs got to do like some kind of college football referees union or something. This has got to be a full-time job. This has got to be, there needs to be a place where these guys go and they train and they communicate with one another. Like this isn't 1982 anymore. Okay. There are millions of dollars being bet on these football games, and these numbskulls, these PE teachers are out here messing this stuff up, man. And it's gotten out of hand. It's worse than it's ever been. And I don't know what's made it so much worse this year. You know, I can't put my finger on it, but it's a problem. It's a problem. Another thing I'm beefing about this week, and I saw Ole Miss do it a ton in their football game, and it's absolutely ridiculous and shameful. Okay, I feel like I'm doing Mark's. You remember Peter Griffin's segment on Family Guy where he's like, you know what really grinds my gears? I feel like I'm doing like a grinds my gears segment here, but I got to get this off my chest. People faking injuries on the football field. Stop it. You look like a complete idiot. You look like the biggest wuss in the world. No way that all these people are faking these injuries. I can't believe what I'm seeing. Ole Miss today, Jackson Dart points at his running back while he's standing in the backfield. They're on offense. Points at the running back in the backfield and says, go down. Right? What are we doing? We got to have some, we got to have some kind of rule. If something is that egregious, that somebody's just doing it that obviously, there's got to be able to be some kind of penalty that goes along with this. I don't know what you do. I don't know if you do a certain amount of them, you know, before there's a penalty. I don't know how you do it. I don't have the answer. But what I know is it is a strategy of a lot of football teams at this point to go down on the football field to stop play and stop clock. And it's messing with the integrity of the game. It really is. So, it's one thing when you go down on defense. I think that's pretty cowardly, first of all. But when you go down on offense to stop the clock, that's downright cheating, Mason. That's not when you have a timeout and you don't want to call your timeout, so you tell somebody to go down. That's downright sorry, man. And that you might not be breaking the rule, but you're sure as hell bending the hell out of it. And I hate that. Any thoughts on those couple of things?
There should be like a 10-second runoff if you're losing and you're on offense and you go down. 10-second runoff,
Yeah.
I mean, I could see something like that being implemented at some point.
Something's got to be done. I mean, because it's gotten way, 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 way out of hand. Bear Alexander quit on his football team. Let's talk about quitters for just a second. Okay. He didn't make a business decision for him. He didn't do anything to make himself better. No, he quit. He's a quitter. And he's got a history of quitting. And these are the types of guys that you got in the locker room, in good standing, right? The Bear Alexander is a mood killer. He is just drama waiting to happen. And he got his paycheck from USC, and he decided that he's just going to sit his little happy butt out and sit in his little apartment or whatever. And I heard that he's got some kind of godfather that was some kind of ex-NFL guy or whatever. I don't know who that is, and I don't really care. But that gentleman is leading this young gentleman down the wrong path. And here's the bad part about all this, though, Mason. One of these big teams is going to go scoop Bear Alexander up as soon as the portal opens. I mean, I as a Georgia fan, obviously he's been to Georgia already. I wouldn't think he would come back to Georgia, but I don't want him. I don't want him to be part of my locker room. I don't know what effect that's going to have on the team. And statistically, he's kind of been just a guy ever since he left Georgia anyway. I mean, decent numbers, don't get me wrong, but there's other guys in the country who have replicated those numbers. Now, he was playing on a bad defense, but I digress. He quit. He flat out quit on his team. There's no getting around that. Bear Alexander is going to be playing for one of y'all's teams next year. And who knows what that does to a locker room. And there's example number 1,348 why I don't like the transfer portal. It's great for some things, but people like Bear Alexander give this era of college football a bad name and put a bad taste in fan base's mouths. Anything on that?
No, I mean, I completely agree. We've got these guys, the UNLV quarterback as well, who abandons his team, who is on the verge of potentially making the 12-team playoff by the end of the season in ULV. They're on a short list of teams outside of the Power Four that could potentially make college football playoffs, and he abandons his team because he was owed some money apparently. And look, I don't know the specifics. Maybe that's true. Maybe it's the difference of $50,000 a year to $250,000 a year, which for me would be, I mean, I could argue that, I guess, in some capacity. But at the end of the day, look, no matter what the specifics are, this is steering college football in the wrong direction. I think that there needs to be some decisions made by those who are in charge of college football, the powers that be, and they really need to look at this and put a stop to it, because our sport kind of relies on players being able to play in these football games and not worrying about the off the field issues, and that's kind of what the sport has become. I do feel confident that this will change at some point, but this is just another example of how broken the sport is off the field in college football, and hopefully here soon we get some what do they call it, a revenue sharing agreement or something in place to limit the off the field distractions that we're seeing in our sport that we never used to see. This used to be an amateur sport. It's obviously not now, but it still should be treated in that, in a sense that these players should be able to develop their game to get to the next level. And to me, that's what's the most appealing aspect of the sport. Why it's better than the NFL is because these players are playing for something. And when you're making $3 million a year, it's hard to argue that you're playing for anything at that point. When you're making more than you probably will in the NFL. And so there's got to be something that comes from this, but there are now a couple of examples this season that point to college football needing to make a change to really maintain our sport in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I just wonder. I had an old boss at an old job of mine. He used to tell me we would come out with new products, and I would, human nature, you would say, "Ah, that product's probably not going to do that well," or "That product is. I bet that product's going to do well." And his old saying to me was, "Well, let's let the market dictate what sells and what doesn't sell. You put it out there, and let's see what sells." And I just feel like at some point, the people making all these donations, what return on investment are they getting here? And I know that's what a donation is. It's not an investment necessarily, but at some point, I'm just wondering how is this going to work out? It seems like there's a lot of people getting burned on these big payments to people like Bear Alexander. Yeah, we'll pay you a bunch of money, come play here. All right, cool. I'm here. Let's go. Work out, do all the spring and fall. I think I'm good. I'm on red shirt. Thanks for the check, though.
Yeah.
And then as far as the guy at UNLV, shame on you and your representation, sir, the quarterback. I understand what everybody's saying. You didn't get your money. I get that. I understand that. You're the one that didn't get your money. You should have got paid up front. And you should have had everything in writing. This spit on your hand and handshake type stuff and I'll get you paid back later, that's not how business is done in the real world. Unless it's like a service provided or something like that. Like when you're the face of or a spokesman or somebody's using your name, your image, and your likeness, you got to get paid on the front end on that. Or have it in writing where you're getting installments or so. The UNLV quarterback, shame on you for not doing your end of it. You're supposed to be the businessman now. You're supposed to be the professional. You're supposed to have representation. And somebody dropped the foot. I almost said drop the football. Somebody dropped the ball. And there's probably two parties that dropped the ball in this one. But that UNLV quarterback, I don't even know his name. He's one of them. And, the hilarious thing to me was that the guy on ESPN, whatever his name is, I forget, the behind the scenes guy, whatever.
Pete Thamel.
Yeah, he said, don't worry about him. He's going to get a really good quarterback coach, and he's got an NFL quarterback coach that's going to be working with him. He's going to be better than ever when he comes back. Why are you even saying that on TV? Nobody even knows who this kid is, first of all. And I don't give a damn who you train with. You think there ain't a million kids out there training, getting better every single year? What are we even talking about here? This guy hasn't done a damn thing. Yeah. So I don't know. We entertain this type of behavior, and I think that's half of the battle here. I mean, but then again, this generation of these kids, they seem to really just not care about what anybody thinks. Arizona.
Watch.
Final.
He'll end up as the starting quarterback for Georgia next year, now that you said that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Georgia's already got a backup quarterback that's suing the University of Florida.
That's right.
So why not get a guy that's suing Florida, UNLV? Hell, maybe we can find somebody that'll sue the hell out of Alabama. I don't know. I don't know. Arizona beats Utah 23-10. So Utah takes a conference loss there. That just kind of evens things out. Oklahoma State with 2 conference losses now doesn't seem like quite as big of a deal. don't look now. The Big 12, look, it's going to be hilarious. The Big 12 is going to have a 2-loss champion.
Yeah.
They're
Well,
going to
I
have
mean,
a 2-loss champion with an automatic bid.
we said in the preseason that, Utah and Kansas State might be good enough to make the 12-team playoff, but the Big 12 champion is probably going to walk out with at least a loss, and the runner-up's going to have 2 or 3 losses. So there's not going to be 2 teams from the Big 12 that get in, even though they could be deserving. There's just so much parity in this league, and I think that we're starting to see that unfold before our eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like I said, Utah goes down. Score can only muster up 10 points. So not having Cam Rising finally does bite them in the butt. Played with fire long enough, and they got burned. Arizona was the one that provided the flame, and Arizona, looking like they're in a lot better shape all of a sudden. So that'll be a team to kind of keep our eye on. They've been inconsistent, but they do have a little bit of that wow factor with Tetaroa McMillan and Noah Fafita. Don't look now. Maybe they're starting to figure something out. And I saw people catching passes other than Tetaroa and McMillan, which is a big step in the right direction for that football team. Guys, I think we're going to wrap it up for today. It is like 2 o'clock here in the morning here on the East Coast. We thank you all so much for tuning in to the First and Long College Football Show. It was a great Saturday of football. As a Georgia fan, it started off rocky, ended up being a thriller. Georgia loses. Alabama is going to be your new number 1 pretty much in all the standings. Come check out our top 25. We'll have that released, I guess, tomorrow, right, Mason? Tomorrow evening?
All right. Yep.
And so we'll have the top 25 released, our very own top 25. Come check it out, see where your team's ranked, see how far Georgia went down on the list. And then we got all our live shows next week. We look forward to seeing you guys there. Thank you again for watching the First and Long College Football Show. I'm Marcus. That's Mason. Everybody have a great morning.